2023-10-EC. And by the book title, It Feels Good to Be Yourself, written by Teresa Thorne, illustrated by Noah Jennings. My name is Dr. Bessie Jackson, and I'm here to aid you in this case. Pursuant to Section 1006.28 of the statute and other applicable law, each party would have an adequate and fair opportunity to be heard and to present evidence. I will listen to all the evidence presented by both sides of this case, and I will prepare a recommended order that will be submitted to the school board. At this hearing, each party will have 1 hour to present their case, which includes an opening statement, presenting evidence, questioning witnesses, and closing statement. To my left is Ms. Kim Green, who is the school board secretary, will be our timekeeper. With the exception of evidence that is irrelevant, immaterial, or unduly repetitious, I will accept all other evidence of nature commonly relied upon a reasonable person in the conduct of their affairs. Any part of the evidence may be presented to me in written form. All testimony shall be made under oath. Hearsay evidence may only be used for the purpose of submitting or explaining other evidence. Where each party that is witness in this case, please come to the mic and state their name for the record. Afterward, please remain standing and have taken the oath of swearing in. Please come forth already. Sit tight. All of you. You're okay.
My name is Patty Duvall, District Youth Specialist. Amanda Small, Elite Church Order.
Good afternoon, Heather Harper, Principal, Order Elementary.
Dr. John Ray, Curriculum Specialist for Social Studies, Community Development, West County Public Schools.
John Kedberry, Curriculum Director at West County Public Schools.
Dr. Ray, you have any witnesses?
Some of them are the same ones, the other ones were not, provided.
Witnesses, will you please raise your right hand for the swearing in? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Eunice. Dr. Miller, will you make it?
Okay. I have a few opening comments before my opening argument. Good afternoon, Ms. Jackson. I appreciate the time you have dedicated to this affair. However, a few minutes ago, I provided you a copy of my request that you disqualify yourself as our hearing officer. I made the request over 2 weeks ago through the superintendent, but I never received a response from you as our hearing officer. I have also presented that request to the school board, who apparently took no action. This was all before I read your recommended order from the January 23rd hearing on the book Melissa. I have also handed you a copy of that order annotated with my comments that was provided to the school board. Here's an excerpt from your order with my comment. Quote, despite having not included pornography on her original form as an objection, the petitioner stated in her presentation and evidence at the hearing that it was her belief that the book was pornographic. My response, this is patently false. My opening statement started with a sentence, quote, no book that normalizes the use of pornography or dirty magazines is appropriate in the K-5 environment. Any administrator who says differently should be fired and kept away from children. End quote. And the closing statement also started with that assertion. Also, consider slide 12 for my presentation in evidence titled K-5 Media Center, which summarized my argument about referencing pornography, stating, quote, books referencing pornography and dirty magazines have no place in a K-5 Media Center. No further discussion should be needed. And, quote, this is not the type of curiosity we should be awakening in our children. In an earlier comment, I stated, this is false and misrepresentation of my evidence in my argument. The video recording of the hearing from minute 50 to 55 shows I never objected based on pornographic content. In addition, at minute 59.31 and also at 105 to 107 minutes, I made it clear that my objection was not to sexually explicit content, but to the normalization of use of pornography by young children. The content of your recommended order manifested a gross lack of professionalism and or an extreme bias that prevents you from truthfully and accurately reporting my evidence and arguments to the school board. Therefore, you leave me no alternative but to renew my request that you disqualify yourself from further consideration of my objections to books in my children's schools. This is not really the superintendent's decision. It's not Ms. Siegel's decision. She's not your legal counsel. This is your personal decision. Only you know whether you can be fair and unbiased. I would like to know your decision at this moment.
It is also protocol for the opposing side to be able to respond, and I did not know this was coming before you until just a moment ago. And I think it's inappropriate for this to be scheduled at this time. If you're going to have a motion heard or any kind of thing heard, it needs to be noticed with appropriate notice for the public and anybody else to know what's going to be before the hearing officer. So I would think at this point that's inappropriate. And at this point, I think we should just go on with the hearing.
And do want to ask you, Judge.
Excuse me, Mr. Edward.
I would just like to clarify that this is not a civil case, so I can ask the judge directly, and I did register this request previously.
Comment on your request, I will not recuse myself, so we may move on with the hearing, please.
Okay, thank you.
And I can short circuit some of this, Dr. Morrow. I'll be happy
Excuse me,
to.
it's my time to speak.
I will, with number one, informal proceeding, I will agree with you on that.
Can I have my time to speak?
We're not starting. Let's not start the time until we actually start the hearing. That's okay with me if it suits Dr. Morrow.
Dr. Monroe, that was part of your opening statement when you read that letter for refusing, right?
I haven't finished.
But that was part of your opening statement.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So the time has started with your opening.
I was asking if you would continue without being interrupted.
I think I explained to you at the beginning that you have 1 hour, which would include opening statement, presenting of evidence, questioning witnesses, and closing statement. So you are within your hour,
Okay, these are housekeeping affairs.
but it's in your opening statement.
Well, let me continue if I may. Your refusal to disqualify yourself makes me even more concerned whether you can be fair and unbiased in this proceeding. In other judicial or quasi-judicial settings, a hearing officer, after receiving repeated requests to disqualify themselves, would disqualify themselves because of the potential perception that has been created by the request that they disqualify themselves. So I must ask you again whether you can be unbiased toward me in considering my objection to this library book.
Dr. Miller, I was recommended by the superintendent to the board, which the board unanimously accepted my recommendation. You may reverse that process in that same procedure. Please continue with the hearing on It Feels Good to Be Yourself.
Okay, well, on another housekeeping issue, I want to bring up the witness influence. In previous hearings, I have seen the board's witness coaching other witnesses from the sidelines, even mouthing answers to them. This is completely unacceptable. Therefore, I request that you have all those who may testify to remain outside of this hearing room until they're called to testify. And I further request that you instruct the witnesses to not talk to each other about their testimony either before or after they've testified.
Dr. Miller, denied. Please move on with the hearing.
Lastly, my presentation will not be limited to 1 hour, since this limitation is not contained in the state statutes or the SBAC's policy handbook, both of which guarantee I will have adequate time to proffer my evidence and argument in support of my objection. Without objections or interruptions and calling witnesses on one time, I am hopeful that this whole process can be shortened. I wish to submit a copy of these comments to you to be part of the record.
Dr. Miller, at an adequate time decided by me, I will dismiss this hearing. Please move forward.
Excuse me, is there another document being given to the hearing officer, Mr. Edward? Is it the same document?
Excuse me, somebody's called, hang on a second. I turned this up. What was your question again?
You handed something to the hearing officer that you did not hand me a copy of.
I think you did you have a copy of this?
You handed me a copy of
It's
this.
what you asked me for earlier.
That's it.
That is it.
Okay, you didn't hand her a second copy?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Continue? Thank you. I wish to say at the outset that this is not what I want to be doing with my life. I'm a married woman, a mother of 3 amazing children who have attended numerous schools across the district. My family has lived here for over 6 years, and we really like Gainesville. My parents even bought a condo here so that they'd be closer to their grandchildren. I am a professor at the University of Florida, and I hold several degrees, including a master's degree in education, a master's degree and a PhD in bilingualism and second language acquisition. My area of expertise is in psycholinguistics and sentence language processing. Understanding the meaning of words is one aspect of my expertise. In addition, I possess a teaching certificate in Pennsylvania and New Jersey for the instruction of K-12 Spanish, and also in the state of Florida, where additionally I hold certification as an educational media specialist, which I intentionally sought to better understand the standards that govern selection and use of books and educational materials in Florida schools. I am deeply committed to my children's education and the success of our district schools. This commitment is evident through my active role serving as the parent representative of the School Advisory Council of Terwilliger Elementary School and Walton High School. Additionally, I currently hold the position of NJROTC Booster Secretary at Gainesville High School. I take pride in the achievements of my children, with one being recognized as the National Merit Hispanic Recognition Program recipient, another excelling as a cadet on the academic team headed to the National Brain Roll competition for the 2nd year in a row. And my third child being part of the inaugural cohort in the dual language immersion program at Terwilliger Elementary School. These engagements and accomplishments underscore my unwavering dedication to their educational journey and the district's prosperity. So I'm wearing 2 hats today. I'm a concerned parent and I'm a trained professional. Both these roles have equipped and encouraged me to make objections to certain books in my children's school libraries. This journey began months ago when my older son brought home a book from the library at GHS that contained sexually explicit material depicting pedophilia.
You need to slow down a little bit because it's not coming as clear.
Take a little slow.
You're maybe that off.
Well, that's kind of prejudicial to my time, right? But I'll try.
Speak better.
This journey began months ago when my older son brought home a book from the library at GHS that contained sexually explicit material depicting pedophilia. That revelation led to my looking into the collection in his school's library. Also, while attending a back-to-school event at Terwilliger, I came across a book in the library which contained clearly inappropriate subject matter for elementary-aged children. The potential influence on young impressionable minds without parental help and guidance deeply concerned me. That event also led me to my researching of this school's library collection as well. When I inquired about these books, I was denied even a respectful conversation and was told that there was a form and a procedure online that I needed to follow to object to any book. So far, having found numerous inappropriate books, I've initiated formal objections to each of them. As a result, at least 6 books containing sexually explicit material have been removed from the GHS library. We're about to begin my 3rd hearing before a hearing officer, a former district employee appointed by the superintendent and approved by the school board, which is the last step before presenting these books to a hearing magistrate selected by the Florida Department of Education, who I hope has not been corrupted by the progressive politics of Alachua County. Based on the manner these hearings have been conducted and the ever-changing rules and procedures, it is a foregone conclusion what the outcome will be. But I know I must make a record before reaching the Florida Department of Education and possibly the governor or a courtroom. I am not here representing any group or association who is on a mission to remove objectionable books. I have not been trained by an activist group, nor am I being financially supported by anyone other than myself and my husband. I am merely a concerned parent who also happens to be a trained professional who is concerned for the welfare of my and other children in our educational system. One that is supposed to be neutral when it comes to controversial matters or ideological conflict in our greater society. As a Christian, I live with the philosophy that I should treat people the way I want to be treated. I work hard at not taking offense at anyone who holds views different from mine. Those who do not treat me with respect or are unwilling to engage in respectful civil dialogue. I am also a citizen of a constitutional republic, a limited democracy, and I am proud that my government is committed to protecting my freedom of speech, my parental rights, and where everyone, including government employees who operate public schools, must live under laws adopted by their elected representatives. The cultural ground for our children has shifted significantly since the advent of smartphones, which some parents are giving to their children as early as 8 years old. And particularly, it has led to huge changes in the lives of young girls who are experiencing mental illness and suicide rates up to over 400% in the last 10 years. The author's bio of the book challenged before you today clearly indicates that she's an activist for the transgender phenomenon that swept over the United States and much of the Western world in the last 15 years. 15 years ago, there was virtually no medical literature about girls experiencing gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder, and only 1 in 10,000, 0.1% of boys experienced it. One frequently quoted author who has researched the subject has called it, quote, sudden onset of gender dysphoria, end quote, which is now occurring at higher rates in girls than boys. While there's much debate about the causes, it is certainly not genetic, and smartphones and social contagion are highly suspected. Many professionals are beginning to ask why, and governments are passing laws restricting gender identity counseling and preventing our medical professionals from encouraging youth to transition until they're at least 18 years old. Many who were induced to transition, who have realized that they were manipulated into that decision, have successfully sued for damages for the destruction of their bodies and lives. No public institution, especially in elementary school, should insert themselves in this controversy by making available books or educational material to advocate one way or the other concerning children transitioning their gender identity. Very simply, this is why we're here today. Beyond the broader debate regarding the causes and interventions for this gender dysphoria contagion, the book, It Feels Good to Be Yourself, A Book on Gender Identity by Teresa Thorne, falls short of meeting the standards prescribed in Florida Statutes 1006.40, parenthesis 2, parenthesis B, subparagraphs 3 and 4, specifically due to its lack of suitability for very young student comprehension and its questionable appropriateness for the intended grade level and age groups who have access to it. Although I am prepared to illustrate exactly how the selection of this text does not comply with Florida statutes, I must remind you, as per the Florida Department of Education, Library, Media, and Instructional Material Training, slide 38, quote, parents that are challenging or objecting to materials should not have to prove that those materials are objectionable. Instead, the individuals that chose the materials must be prepared to defend the educational value of the materials if the need arises, end quote. Anticipating the argument that It Feels Good to Be Yourself meets selection criteria because it is not instructional text, I submit that this is correct. It does not meet the definition of instructional material, but it is still subject to the criteria for selection laid out in state statutes and the mandatory library, media, and instructional material training. The court decision in Peter Parnell et al. Versus the School Board of Lake County, Florida, see Exhibit 12, articulates a crucial distinction between instructional materials and library materials with regard to the evaluation of appropriateness. It states, quote, legislature's decision that certain materials are inappropriate for use in classroom instruction does not mean that they are categorically inappropriate in the very different setting of the school library. This statement underscores that certain materials inappropriate for classroom instruction are not automatically deemed inappropriate for inclusion in the school library. The same categorical judgment cannot be applied here, and multiple criteria must be considered. This distinction becomes the foundation for the multiple criteria presented throughout the library, media, and instructional material training. The training offers additional considerations to guide decision-making, but it does not remove the requirement to consider alignment with state standards and curriculum as one of the factors in the decision-making process. In fact, it states that, quote, alignment with state standards and curriculum is a factor that must be considered as one of the criteria that informs the decision. Thus, while instructional materials can be categorically removed based solely on statutory criteria, such as 1001.42, which unequivocally prohibits classroom instruction on gender identity in the K-8 environment, library materials require additional considerations. Slide 32 summarizes this distinction by stating, the selection criteria for instructional materials includes not only what must be considered, same for library materials, and included, but materials that must not be included, which is specific to instructional materials. Both instructional and library material selection must consider the following. 1, the age of the students who have access to the material. 2, the educational purpose to be served by the material. 3, the degree to which the material would be supplemented and explained as part of the normal classroom instruction. Additionally, the procedures for developing library media collections must address the following criteria. 1, book selection must meet the criteria in statute 1006.40, parentheses 3, parentheses D. 2, consultation of reputable, professionally recognized reviewing periodicals and school community stakeholders. 3, the Library Media Center collections based on reader interest, support of state standards and curriculum, and the academic needs of students and faculty. 4, the regular removal of books based on physical condition, rate of circulation, alignment to state standards, relevancy to curriculum, and out-of-date content. Florida Statute 1006.28, parentheses 2, parentheses D, requires that school districts adopt procedures to ensure that library and media center collections support academic standards and curriculum, support the academic needs of the students and faculty, and are based on the interests of the readers. Each of these requirements is important to the creation and maintenance of the school library and media center with an environment capable of supporting students in their academic pursuits and creating lifelong readers. Slide 24 of the training office's advice. When evaluating your collection, you may wish to ask the following questions. 1, does the collection meet the current and future needs of the school population and align with the curricular and instructional needs? 2, does the collection align with the mission and vision of the district of the school? 3, has the collection been developed in compliance with Florida statutes, State Board of Education rules, and school district policies? And slide 27 states that book selection should take academic standards and the academic needs of students and faculty into consideration. Finally, section 1006.28, parentheses 2, parentheses D, 2D, states that districts must adopt procedures that provide for the regular renewal or discontinuance of books based on, at a minimum, physical condition, rate of recent circulation, alignment with state academic standards, and relevancy to curriculum and out-of-date content. These criteria are reinforced by the successful legal arguments in Peter Cornell et al. Versus the School Board of Lake County, Florida. Because, quote, because the compilation of library materials is government speech, the First Amendment does not bar the government from making content and even viewpoint-based choices about what to curate. This applies with even more force in a public school library. As plaintiffs agree, schools must curate appropriate reading material for students to further the government's educational mission. The school library supports that endeavor by providing materials that properly supplement the basic readings assigned through the standard curriculum. By curating a school library, the government conveys its view on which books have the requisite and appropriate quality to bolster student development. Moreover, the feedback that was provided in the Library Council Committee forums revealed that not all reviewers found the book to be age appropriate. For example, Daniel Norman, parent representative, wrote, quote, the vocabulary and definitions are far above suggested ages for the text. Glossary and resources are not sourced. Concepts described are difficult for adults to understand, so how do you expect K-3 students to understand? Reviews list that adult involvement should be in the reading experience, yet the child is not required to have an adult with them to access the book. Beautiful illustrations appeal to younger students, but the content of the book is far above the level of a student who would choose this book based on appearance. She is correct, but her concerns were ignored, and for unknown reasons, she suspiciously voted to keep the book in contradiction to her comments. Is this because besides being a parent representative, she's also employed at the school and has concerns about retaliation? I would like to ask her that, but she has not been provided as a witness today, despite my repeated requests and the district's promise to provide any district employee relevant to the case as witness per my request. Returning to the selection criteria for this text, the maturity level required to engage with the themes in this book is beyond what K-5 students possess. Attempting to delve into such complex and ideological concepts at this developmental stage is both unsuitable and potentially detrimental. Yet, despite failing to meet numerous criteria for book selection, the decision to continue using this book implies that factors beyond educational considerations, such as political motivations, are driving this choice. I wish to submit a copy of my opening comments for you to be part of the record, and to see what I have a copy for you too. Thank you.
Dr. Murrow, you referenced Exhibit 12 that was given. I don't have an Exhibit 12.
It was,
Your Exhibit 12 is referring me to something.
You're referring to the.
it was submitted with my evidence. It was submitted with my evidence. If the number shifted, I apologize, and I can correct that for you.
The exhibit we have as number 12 is the book When Aiden Became a Brother. That's what was on your exhibit list.
I'm sorry, what did I say is, if you could help me, what did I say is exhibit 12, or are you finding it?
No, you spoke to Exhibit 12 was criteria for selection when you was making your commentary. You may move on with your time.
Okay, I'm certain it's there, I'll find it and I'll identify it, the number may be wrong.
I have your packet here with 11 and 12. It's not here. I have it. So that's why I know I do not have it.
I'm right cited now that I have it.
I can provide a copy of the case.
Oh, is that what was the case?
I thought you were referring to the case.
If I'm referring to the case, it's in there, exhibit 12, I believe.
I think we did, I think you said, did you clarify which?
It's in there, exhibits, yeah.
You may proceed, Dr. Murrow.
Well, can I go ahead and do an opening statement?
Yes.
Dr. Jackson and Ms. Green, please put this on. Is this what you just stated, ma'am?
Yes.
I'm going to provide it to the court reporter because she indicated that it would be helpful because Dr. Marul tends to speak rapidly.
Thank you.
And go ahead and take this for my time. I would also like to, I think you were handed more than one thing by the other side. Start counting down on my time, please, Ms. Green. I don't want this to be taken away from anybody else's. I would like to come and approach you, Dr. Jackson, and just see what documents were given to you before the hearing started.
See if it's.
It's the house. Wait.
Okay. The book we're here about today is a book called It Feels Good to Be Yourself. And this is the book. It's available in the library for K to 5. It's a sweet book. There's no sexual content that's forbidden under Florida statute. It's not used for teaching anything about gender identity. The back expresses the real sentiment of the book. And it says, no matter what your gender identity is, you are okay exactly the way you are. And you are loved. That's what this book is about. It's interesting that Ms. Marul, or Dr. Marul, cited Parnell versus the School Board of Lake County because that case actually distinguishes what classroom materials are from materials that made available in the library. It is a case where the plaintiff sued not only the Lake County School Board, but the Florida State Board of Education and Department of Education. And the Department of Education and the Florida Board of Education were referred to as the state defendants. And the state defendants filed a motion in the case asking the court to dismiss the complaint. And in the motion, they stated a number of things that I think are pertinent. The case dealt with a library book about gender called And Tango Makes Three. It's an elementary book about 2 male penguins in the Central Park Zoo who together raised a baby penguin. Lake County had pulled it off the shelf, thinking it violated House Bill 1557, And that's the bill that prohibits classroom instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity from K to 3 and later extended to K to 8. It's what a number of commentators and civilians have called the Don't Say Gay bill. The Florida State defendants, the Florida Department of Education, filed their motion to dismiss, and in the moving papers, they said the following. Lake County removed the book and Tango Makes 3 from the shelves, and this is the important part, incorrectly believing that the restrictions in House Bill 1557 on classroom instruction apply to school library books. They also stated as follows, a school's provision of library books is not an affirmative act teaching in a classroom setting. Library books, by their nature, are optional rather than required reading. Any library book that encourages kids to read voluntarily is supplemental to their education because reading is required in all subject areas. And reading is not confined to the curricular material of a particular course. That's what was stated in the opinion. The reading, getting a child to read voluntarily helps the child in social studies, English, math, science, anything they may take in school. And based on this statement, these statements, Lake County put that book back on the shelf. And Tango Makes 3 and the book we're here about today have the same kind of content, gender identity. The state of Florida said it should not be incorrectly removed, but that's what Dr. Marul is asking you to do. She's asking you to go differently because some slides that she saw when she took a training to add a certificate to her teaching certifications last fall, she studied those slides. But the book in case is not used for any instructional materials, merely a library book available if a student is interested. There's a comment about whether her repeated requests were ignored about production of a witness. As we had decided a while ago, because it was necessary for us all to have sufficient time to prepare, all exhibits and witness lists needed to be produced to the other side 2 weeks before the hearing, because that gave us sufficient time. We had not done that in the fall, and Dr. Marul had 880 pages of exhibits that were given to us 2 days before the hearing, and that was very difficult to handle. So we tried to make it so that there would be sufficient time for all of us to be well prepared. The request for Ms. Norman didn't come in until I guess last Thursday and got to me Monday or Tuesday, and I responded saying I found out that she was not available. It's her birthday today, and she had plans and didn't have daycare. And 2 days notice was not enough. Even necessarily 5 days may not have been enough. But I would suggest that if it's important to have witnesses, then let's find out more than 2 weeks before so we can make sure there's appropriate arrangements made. At the end of what you listened to today, we are going to ask you to follow what the State Board of Education and the State Department have said is appropriate to keep a book like It Feels Good to Be Yourself on the shelf. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Monroe, you may call your first witness. And witnesses, please come to the podium to the seat here.
I'd like to do my presentation first.
I'm
I
sorry.
would like to present my evidence first.
The evidence.
So I was prepared to start with the text, so I'm actually going to just jump ahead. So I want to address something that was just brought up so there's no confusion. So I want to address the case Peter Parnell et al. Versus School Board of Lake County. First of all, this was not a finding, but it was a motion to dismiss.
The plaintiffs complained that the school board had erroneously applied HB 157, HB 1069 to remove a book from the library. The case was dismissed because 1, The case was now moved because the county had abandoned its erroneous interpretation of the statute and formally lifted the restriction on the book in question. 2, the plaintiffs had lacked standing to sue the state defendants because HB 1557 does not regulate library books, so plaintiff cannot trace her injuries to the state defendant's enforcement of HB 1557. The plaintiff's claims fared no better on the merits. The curation of school library books is government speech, and when the government speaks, it may regulate the content of its own message. My challenge to the current text is regulated by the statute FS 1006.28, not HB 1557 or HB 1069, as encoded in Florida Statute 1001.42, except to the extent that Florida Statute 1006.28, parenthesis 2, parenthesis D, 2C, states that the procedures for developing library and media center collections must support state academic standards and aligned curriculum. Let it be clear, I am not challenging the suitability of It Feels Good to Be Yourself, a book on gender identity, under HB 1557 or HB 1069, which applies solely to classroom instruction. I am challenging the suitability of It Feels Good to Be Yourself, a book of gender identity, under the sections of 1006.28, which applies specifically to library materials, and consideration of state standards and aligned curriculum is part of that statute. Lastly, although Parnell versus Lake County dismissed the plaintiff's complaint, it offered some very valuable insight into the role of public schools, of the role of public and public school libraries, and their relationship to the First Amendment. The material made available in a government-operated library are neither a traditional nor a designated public forum in which individuals have a cognizable First Amendment interest. That is, the public library's purpose for acquiring materials is to provide its patrons with materials of requisite and appropriate quality, not to create a public forum for private parties to express themselves.
Excuse me, where is that slide in your packet?
This is taken from the case in their Exhibit 12.
Excuse me, what exhibit number?
I am citing their evidence that they submitted, I believe, under Exhibit 12, the Parnell case.
I'm still asking, is it in the packet that you submitted?
This is my presentation. I did not submit you the slides of my presentation. The evidence referenced was submitted.
But we should have access to all your slides for review before the hearing.
Not on my presentation of the evidence that was submitted.
I have a full packet of all evidence and material, but you have new material that has not been reviewed.
This was submitted as part of the staff attorney's exhibits, I believe, in slide 12. Can you validate that, please?
Dr. Jackson, our Exhibit 12 is the Parnell case. Now, it does not contain any of the legal interpretation of the Parnell case. That's all what her argument
I'm
is.
citing from her document.
It's to the extent, well then, if you'll please let us know where you're citing from, that would be, because I sound to me like argument. I apologize if I'm incorrect.
I'm sorry, I don't have the page in there. I can turn it out to Control F and look for government operated libraries.
Dr. Miller, the reason that you have to submit within 2 weeks of your presentation is that we will have all information that you're going to present.
You have this. I am citing from the evidence that was submitted by the staff attorney.
I don't see it in either place.
It's in
But
Exhibit
I
12 in the case. Page, I think it was 129, if my memory doesn't fail me.
I grew up in 124. I have
And
read all this.
119, I believe it ended in a 9.
And I'm going to allow you to present this, but after this hearing, all that you're going to say at the hearing must be presented within those 2 weeks.
Ma'am, this was presented, you have it in her exhibits, the fact that you can't.
I don't have anything with Parnell versus School Board of Lake County, anything. So continue.
Exhibit 12, Ms. Siegel, could you please validate that you did submit this case?
I was just handed something else that I'm not sure what it is, and so I don't know. Dr. Jackson, we have given you the actual case printed out of the Parnell
I
case.
see that.
Yeah,
I
and,
don't see this interpretation.
yeah, if she's interpreting,
citation.
excuse me, ma'am. To the extent that she's saying anything that's not actually written in the case, I don't know, because I've read the case, but I have not memorized it. I have just been given another document, and I'm not sure why, is,
If you
It's
pause
an
the clock,
excerpt from the case,
if you pause
This
the
is
clock,
okay.
I will find the exact paragraph for
excerpt
you.
from the opinion, the motion to dismiss.
okay, and is this, did you give a copy of this to Dr. Jackson? General protocol.
We have a version with all the authorities removed, so we just have the text if you like it.
Continue document.
Do you want me to find the exact paragraph in here?
No, we'll continue. You won't waste time.
I'm citing from the case that was presented by Ms. Siegel. They say the material made available in a government-operated library are neither a traditional nor a designated public forum in which individuals have a cognizable First Amendment interest. That is, a public library's purpose for acquiring materials is to provide its patrons with materials of requisite and appropriate quality, not to create a public forum for private parties to express themselves. Accordingly, it is not incumbent upon public libraries to provide universal coverage and as much less to provide books of interest to all the people of the community the library serves. Instead, public libraries seek to provide materials that would be of the greatest direct benefit or interest to the community. And to fulfill their traditional missions, they must have broad discretion to decide what material to provide to their patrons. In other words, the government speaks through its selection of which books to put on the shelf and which books to exclude, because that selection reflects the government's view about what materials have requisite and appropriate quality. The government speaks when it compiles the speech of third parties in a public library. And because the compilation of library materials is government speech, the First Amendment does not bar the government from making content and even viewpoint-based choices about what to curate. That principle applies with even more force in the public school library. As plaintiffs agree, schools must curate appropriate reading materials for students to further the government's educational mission. The school library supports that endeavor by providing materials that properly supplement the basic readings assigned through the standard curriculum. By curating its school library, the government conveys its view on which books have the requisite and appropriate quality to bolster student development. Allowing private parties to add preferred books to the school library would hijack the government's message. See Hurley versus Irish American Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Group of Boston. Parade organizers not required to include voices they wished to exclude. The same is for government parade organizers. School libraries. The purpose of the school library is to curate appropriate reading material for students to further the government's educational mission. The school library supports that endeavor by providing materials that properly supplement the basic readings assigned through the standard curriculum. By curating a school library, the government conveys its view on which books have the requisite and appropriate quality to bolster student development. To govern the curation process, the elected officials of the state legislature craft policy encoded in statutes that school officials are mandated to follow. To clearly understand how to apply these statutes, the state has mandated that media specialists must hold the approved state certifications and that they must complete the state-created library media instructional materials training. Selection decisions must be based on these considerations and guidelines as stipulated in the statutes and in the training. Personal opinions or preferences must be suppressed in favor of professional opinions guided by the above-mentioned statutes. This is true as much for me as it is for you. One person cannot dictate what is available in the school libraries. The voice of the democratically elected officials is the only voice that governs that selection. So, let it be clear that I am not challenging based on that motion or under HB 1069 or HB 51559. I am challenging under the state statutes that guide selection for library materials. I would like to share a few pages from this book, which is indicated for grades 1 to 3. This is Ruthie. She's a transgender girl. That means when she was born, everyone thought she was a boy until she grew a little older, old enough to tell everyone that she's actually a girl. Girl is Ruthie's gender identity. This is Ruthie's brother, Xavier. Xavier is a cisgender boy. That means when Xavier was born, everyone thought he was a boy, and as he grew older, it turned out everyone was right. He is a boy. Boy is Xavier's gender identity. There are so many different ways to be a boy or a girl, too many to fit in a book, but not everyone feels like either a boy or a girl. Non-binary is a helpful word that can describe a kid who doesn't feel exactly like a boy or a girl. This is Ruthie's friend Alex. Alex is both a boy and a girl. When Alex was born, everyone thought Alex was a girl, but Alex is both boy and girl. This is Alex's gender identity. This is Alex's friend JJ. JJ is neither a boy nor a girl. Ever since JJ was very little, they never felt exactly like a boy or a girl. They just felt like themselves. This is JJ's gender identity. Alex and JJ are non-binary. Just like there are many different ways to be a boy or a girl, there are many different ways to be non-binary. Too many to fit in a book. I'm going to jump ahead. See, when you're born, you couldn't tell people who you were or how you felt. They looked at you and made a guess. Maybe they got it right, maybe they got it wrong. What a baby's body looks like when you're born can be a clue to what the baby's gender will be, but not always. When people guess wrong, it's okay to let them know. Ruthie was 5 when she told her parents, I know you think I'm a boy, but really, I feel like a girl. Oops, Ruthie was a girl all along. They just didn't know it at first. Xavier was 3.5 when he told his family, I'm a boy, I like being a boy. You might feel like a boy, you might feel like a girl, you might feel like both boy and girl, or neither. You might feel like your gender changes from day to day or from year to year. I'm going to stop there, questions of time, but I'd like to point out that at the end there's a glossary that's definitely aimed at adults. There's also resources, including the Trevor Project with a phone number that would connect youth to a therapist within minutes of calling that phone number. Let's look at the statutes. Florida Statute 1006.28, parenthesis 2, parenthesis A, 2B, prohibited content. Any material used in a classroom, made available in a school or classroom library, or included on a reading list that contains content which is pornographic or prohibited under Statute 847.012, depicts or describes sexual conduct, unless such material is for a course required by certain statutes or identified by the State Board of Education rule, is not suited to student needs in their ability to comprehend the material presented, or is inappropriate for the grade level and age group for which the material is used. Let me read to you this other statute, 1006.282D2C. School library media services established and maintenance. I'll jump down to bullet point 2 or number 2. Each district school board shall adopt procedures for developing library media center collections, and the procedure must A, require the book selection meets the criteria, which I mentioned above, require consultation of reputable, professionally recognized review and periodicals and school community stakeholders, provide for library media center collections, including classroom libraries, based on reader interest, support of state academic standards, and aligned curriculum and the academic needs of student and faculty, and D, provide for the regular removal of discontinuance of books based on, at a minimum, physical condition, rate of recent circulation, alignment to state academic standards and the relevancy to curriculum, out-of-date content, and required removal pursuant to subparagraph A2. Let's look at this bullet point C or subparagraph, however you refer to it. And let's look at the state academic standards to see if it's aligned with the curriculum. Statute 1000.071, personal titles and pronouns. It shall be the policy of every public K-12 educational institution that a person's sex is an immutable biological trait and that it is false to ascribe to a person a pronoun that does not correspond to such person's sex. 1000.21, system-wide definitions. Sex means the classification of a person as either male or female or male. In 1001.42, classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in pre-kindergarten through grade 8. 1003.46, health education. When such instruction and course material contains instruction on human sexuality, a school shall classify males and females as provided in 100.219, which I just read to you, and teach that biological males impregnate biological females by fertilizing the female egg with male sperm, that the female then gestates the offspring, and that these reproductive roles are binary, stable, and unchangeable. Let me go back to some of the quotes from the text. This is Ruthie. She's a transgender girl. That means when she was born, First of all, that's a mispronoun, she was a boy. Everyone thought she was a boy until she grew a little older, old enough to tell everyone that she's actually a girl. Alex is both a boy and a girl. JJ is neither a boy or a girl. I'm gonna skip the bottom one.
There.
You may feel like your gender changes from day to day or from year to year.
Okay. Yeah.
So going back to the paragraph, the subparagraph C, providing for library media center collections, including classroom libraries based on the support of reader interest, state academic standards, and line curriculum, as well as the academic needs of students and faculty, I ask question 1, to what degree does this text support state academic standards? To what degree does this text align with the curriculum? To what degree does this text support the academic needs of students and faculty? According to the statutes that I read to you, the first one prohibits the instruction of sexual orientation and gender ideologies in grade K to 8. The next, that a person's sex is immutable biological trait, and it's false to describe a personal pronoun that does not correspond to a person's sex. Sex means the classification of a person as either female or male, and that these reproductive roles are binary, stable, and unchangeable. This book clearly does not support state academic standards. It is not aligned to curriculum, and it does not support the academic needs of students and faculty. This book is in direct opposition to such standards. Turning to bullet point B, require consultation of reputable, professionally recognized reviewing periodicals and school community stakeholders. I just want to add, when you're assessing library materials, not one single criterion is categorical, as I said in my opening statements. You look at all the criteria and you make a professional judgment. So let's look at more criteria, because perhaps, despite its misalignment with standards and curriculum, it meets the other criteria and somehow is acceptable. So let's look at other criteria. Let's look at the consultation of peer reviews and community stakeholders. When we look at the numerous peer reviews that were submitted as evidence, we find multiple warnings that this book should be adult-directed. This book would be an exceptional read aloud for classrooms or story time, or for an adult reading one-on-one with a child. This book begs adult involvement in the reading experience, giving kids and adults a hopeful model for discussing. Let's look at the Library Advisory Council comments. I highlight the pertinent ones. I would consider communicating with a parent first if their child selected this book. Vocabulary definitions are far above the suggested ages for the text. Glossary and resources are not sourced. Concepts described are difficult for adults to understand, so how do we expect K-3 students to understand? The reviews list that the adult involvement should be in the reading experience, that a child is not required to have an adult with them to access the book. Beautiful illustrations appeal to younger students, but the content of the book is far above the level of students who would choose the book based on appearance. Evidently, this person does not think the book is age appropriate, yet they voted to keep it. I would like to know why. At the district level, this book could really assist some students, especially if read with an adult, or with a discussion because some of the vocabulary. It is a harmless book, and it's a non-fiction book that is not always circulated well. First of all, I don't understand how fictional characters with a fictional setting and a fictional plot is considered non-fiction. But it's not circulated well, keep that in mind. The topic should include parent discussion for students in grades K to 2, but third and above can read and comprehend the material. It's found in the nonfiction section. Grades K to 2 do not select library materials from this section for independent reading. So the book is targeting K to 2, yet is not made available to K to 2 because it seems to be the agreement that parents should be involved. So then it's provided to grades 3 and up, which wouldn't be age appropriate according to the editors. Does not preclude comprehension. Story reads as if it was meant to be read to with a child by an adult. So the peer reviews indicate that this book would best be used as an adult-directed text. The numerous resources in the back of the book support that this book is indicated for adults and is targeting adults. The different LAC members also highlight that this text is best indicated for adult-directed reading. This should be a red flag because the statutes prohibit any adult-directed discussion or instruction of gender identity in the K to 8 environment. Students would only have self-selected access and reading of this text. This text is inappropriate for the K to 5 school library context, according to that criterion. Let's turn to another criterion. The department shall publish and regularly update a list of materials that were removed or discontinued as a result of an objection and disseminate the list to school districts for consideration in their selection procedures. A similar book in content aimed at the same age group called When Aiden Became a Brother was removed from 2 different school districts in the state of Florida. Was it taken into consideration that that text was removed? Criteria for selection. A similar book was removed from 2 counties. This should have been taken into consideration when reviewing this book, and it points again to its unsuitability. Let's talk about parental rights. From Florida Statutes 1001.42, parentheses 8, there is a fundamental right of parents to make decisions regarding the upbringing and control of their children. Providing students with materials, books, forms that direct them to counselors without consultation with the parents is in direct violation to Florida statutes. Additionally, Florida Statute 394.478 indicates that the age of consent for a minor to meet with a therapist without parental consent is 13 or older. There are no 13-year-olds in Terwilliger Elementary School. Thus, providing them with a phone number or a hotline to the Trevor Project that would connect them with a therapist without parental consent is in violation of that statute. In addition, the Trevor Project facilitates secrecy. A student can click on the web page and the first thing they're taught is how to quickly exit and hide their browser history. They're provided access to counselors within minutes, either by text, phone, or chat. The Trevor Project itself says it's intended for ages 13 to 24. Again, no student is age 13 in the Terwilliger Elementary School. So taking into consideration the Florida statute that I just enumerated, this book provides contact info that would allow students direct access to therapists without parental consent. This is in violation of the statute. Subparagraph D, provide for the regular removal or discontinuance of books based on, at a minimum, physical condition, rate of recent circulation, alignment to state academic standards and relevancy to curriculum, out-of-date content, and required removal pursuant to subparagraph A2. I requested the circulation history of this text well in advance of this hearing, and it was not provided to me. Ms. Duvall, I hope you're prepared to share that with me today. However, not having that circulation history, the LAC comments indicate to a low rate of recent circulation. Taking into consideration the low rate of recent circulation, plus its lack of alignment with state academic standards and relevancy to curriculum, I asked, have you considered its removal or discontinuance? Again, this book should be removed under this statute because of its low rate of recent circulation, its lack of alignment with state academic standards, and its lack of relevance to curriculum. I would like to summarize all the criteria that I have just addressed and against which I measured the merits of this text. So when I looked at the statute that says to provide for library and media center collections, including classroom libraries based on reader interest, the support of state academic standards and aligned curriculum, and the academic needs of students and faculty, the professional decision of its appropriateness according to that criterion should be known. This content is in direct opposition to numerous state standards and curriculum. The standards that it may support, as in literacy or whatnot, could be better supported with a different text that is not in direct contradiction to other standards. Now, I'll pull apart the line about based on reader interest. You may argue that there's a large reader interest in this library or community to have this book present. However, I don't think that's going to be backed by the circulation data, and it certainly wasn't backed by the comments in the LAC about its circulation data. Looking at the criterion of requiring consultation of reputable, professionally recognized reviewing periodicals and school community stakeholders, the peer reviews and library council reviews indicate that this book should be adult-directed. Thus, it is not suited to student needs and their ability to comprehend the material presented on their own. The department shall publish and regularly update a list of materials that were removed or discontinued as a result of an objection and disseminate the list to school districts for consideration in their selection procedures. Again, a book very similar in content was removed from 2 Florida school districts. This should have warranted careful consideration of the current text. Then, the statutes regarding parental rights and the age of consent to therapy. Again, the school cannot provide access to therapists without parental consent to minors under the age of 13. Providing direct access to a therapist would be in violation of that statute and thus should bias your opinion to indicating this book is inappropriate. Lastly, providing for the regular removal or discontinuance of books based on, at minimum, physical condition, rate, or recent circulation, alignment with state academic standards, and relevancy to curriculum. The low rate of recent circulation, which I'm sure is going to be backed by the data that Mr. Ball is going to prepare or share with me today, the lack of alignment to state academic standards and their relevance to curriculum indicate that this text should be removed and discontinued. Taking all the statutes together and applying the numerous guidelines and considerations stipulated by the state, this text fails to meet the threshold of appropriateness for the K-5 environment. I'd like to also highlight that according to the Florida Best Standards for English Language Arts, to bolster reading habits of students, there is a list that is provided of recommended texts. This list should serve as a guide for teachers, curriculum developers, and test makers as they prepare their instructional units and materials for Florida students. It's not intended to be exhaustive, but to serve as a foundation for educators when selecting additional rich and meaningful texts. I decided to investigate this list. As you will see, only 31% of those recommended texts by the state are actually adopted into the collection at Terwilliger Elementary School. I would like to recommend that instead of taking a book that fails to meet almost all the criteria applied to it, we focus on the texts that were highly recommended by the state that are currently absent in the school library. Additionally, I offer this compromise. If you think this book is so valuable for the specific limited population in our school who would not have access to it otherwise, or who desperately need a book such as this, place the book in the guidance counselor's office, and upon request, allow a parent to solicit it for their family, but take it out of the popular circulation of the school public library. So that I'll stop. Move on with, sorry. I would like to move on with witnesses.
And you get February to ratify 18 minutes.
All it's done. Get. Yeah. Okay, watch these. What?
I'd like to call my first witness, Amanda Swall, the media specialist at Terwilliger Elementary School.
Ms. Wall, do you know how to turn the microphone on?
Yeah, Dr. Jackson showed.
Ms. Swall, could you, I guess, state your name and the title for the record?
Ms. Wall, school media specialist at Terwilliger Elementary.
All my questions are regarding the book, It Feels Good to Be Yourself. And I want to know, have you read this book?
Yes.
Many times or
About twice.
twice? Okay, you previously testified at 2 other hearings concerning my objections to books in the Terwilliger Library. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you meet with Ms. Duval to discuss your testimony before the first hearing in December?
I don't recall, as my supervisor, we consulted on me.
How many times do you think you consulted with her before the first hearing?
Maybe once.
Twice. Did she send you any emails or provide any written material for you to review or study before you testified?
I don't recall.
What are your qualifications to be an elementary school media specialist?
I have a master's degree in library science from the University of South Florida. This is my 13th year working in that position.
Did you complete the DOE mandatory training for media specialists prior to my objecting to the book in your library last September?
Yes.
Did you find anything significantly changed from your previous Did you find anything significantly changed from your previous training and experience with book selections?
I'm not sure I understand.
The training was new this year. Did you find anything significantly different in it compared to previous trainings or guidelines?
We didn't have any official state mandated trainings.
So this is the first state mandated training.
Yes.
So before you just guide yourself by the statutes as written?
Can you repeat that?
Prior to, if you're saying that this is the first training the state has mandated, Did you just guide your selection criteria based on the state statutes?
And there's different selection criterias, but from my experience, I maintained within my, the grade levels that I teach.
What criteria
I
do
think
you
the
consult?
district has, criteria guiding us in some fashion,
Is it district criteria?
I believe so.
When did you complete the training for this current criteria?
I completed this August, September, and then I did it the previous year as well, in the previous January.
So like 9 months apart?
Yes.
So in the year 2023, you did it twice? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, because it was required to do before we could purchase library materials.
Even though you had already done it once?
Yeah, I don't know.
When you took the training, did you find anything objectionable or upsetting within the training?
Just some questioning of where it's possibly speaking to instructional material and not all library books are instructional.
If you've taken the training twice, you know that there's 4 sections in it, right? The first 3 apply to library selection and the 4th apply to instructional material, correct?
Yes.
So the first 3, there's no confusion over what it's applying to, correct?
For my judgment and my guidance, I believe there's some overlap.
I'm sorry, can you clarify?
For my judgment and guidance, I believe there is some overlap.
What do you mean by some overlap where or what? Can I ask you what you're looking at?
I just have some notes, my own,
Handwritten notes?
my typed notes, and the,
That's not personal, no, she can use this one.
I'm just referring to the slide from the training.
But in the training, again, sorry, there's 4 categories, right? 4 sections. The first 3 are specific to library books, and the 4th is for curriculum, instructional materials,
Mm-hmm.
and 1 slide in the 4th category overlaps. But are you saying something different than that?
No,
So the first 3 sections apply to library materials.
I believe some of it is a guideline for library materials, yeah.
Why not all of it?
I'm feeling some of it is, there is overlap, some of it is blending,
I don't understand what you were saying.
and I'm not sure I understand your question.
I'm going to, she's asked a question, the witness has answered a question, and if she wants to point to specific things, this is my time now, don't subtract it from Ms. Rule's time. If there's some specific area, I think she could ask a specific question rather than asking her to clarify more.
I'm just asking for clarity because I didn't understand the answer to my question.
Please state your question, Dr. Mark.
Okay, there are 4 sections to the mandatory training. The first 3 are specific to library material selection. The 4th is instructional material, and the first slide of the 4th there's overlap. Is that how you understand it?
Yes,
Okay, so the first 3 sections are all about selecting for library material, correct?
I don't have.
You want me to show it to you?
Yeah, that would be.
Can I have a pause on time on this stuff?
Is the question relevant to this book that we're hearing, Dr. Merle? Or is this based on her training? I'm not sure where you're leading this to.
Well, I want to make sure that she's applying the guidelines from the training in the section of the text.
And what, are you speaking specifically to this library book and its subject, a topic, or, I'm not sure I know where you're going with the question.
My computer's loading. So the line of my argument here is that there's state statutes, right, that are laid out by the legislatures.
to interpret those statutes, they created a training manual that by law, all media specialists must take to apply to their selection criteria, right? So I'm trying to get to, if she's applying the guidelines of the professional training to interpret the statutes to the selection of the texts, namely this text in the Turbo Library. My computer's kind of delayed in reacting, but I think you can see there the 4 sections of the training. Number 1, criteria for selection of library materials and reading lists. 2, collection development policies for library and media specialists. 3, selection and maintenance of library and media material for library and media specialists. And then 4, training to assist reviewers of instructional materials. And my question was, do you accept that the first 3 categories apply to the selection of library material?
Can you tell me what page that's on in your exhibits?
Exhibit number 3, I believe, slide number,
This is a slide that you're showing us here.
it's under the exhibit listed as training, library material training. And since my computer's being a little wonky here, unfortunately I can't tell you the slide number. It's slide 2.
Okay, let's take any more, and I'll show you what we have from what you've given us in instructional material training transcript for slide 2. And it's just,
Can we pause the talk, because this takes up so much of my time, and
I've asked you to take your time.
Dr. Monroe, I have your slide here, but it only has 3. And if I'm looking at right, the criteria for selection of material. Real pornography suited to student needs are close to the grade level and age group which material be used to make available. Now that's the
I don't
slide.
think you're
Okay.
well, maybe it's, give me a moment, I'll find it for you, if you don't mind.
All right, let's proceed, please. The time is at 11 minutes now. Now, please.
With exhibit 2,
The second page.
yes. Page 2 of exhibit 2. Criteria for selection of library materials and reading lists, collection development policies for library and media specialists, selection and maintenance of library and media materials. All 3 of them say library materials, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and the 4th one says instructional materials. I didn't mean to get caught up on this. I thought this was self-evident, but wait. So my question is, within section 1, slide 11, slide 11, consideration should include student ability to comprehend material, the degree which the material will be explained, supplemented by classroom instruction, the educational purposes of the material, the accurate portrayal of the state's broad racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, cultural diversity without bias or indoctrination, age and grade level of students, and maturity of students, and to err on the side of caution. Do you agree that all those considerations apply to selecting library materials?
Some do, some do not.
Based on what are you making that discernment? Because I just pointed out that this is in section 1. Let me read to you again the header of section 1.
She's answered the question, Dr. Jackson, because she doesn't need to tell her that her answer's wrong and what she wants it to be.
Did you see the state statute that says that you need to look at the alignment with curriculum standards? Go back to that. Sorry, my computer's overworked. Okay. Florida statute 1006.28, parentheses 2, parentheses D, 2C. Provide for library media center collections, including classroom libraries based on reader interest, support of state academic standards and align curriculum and the academic needs of students and faculty. Do you agree that that statute should guide your decision-making for books in the school library?
Some books in the library are for supporting curriculum, but some are for voluntary choice and checkout.
Where are you reading that distinction in the statute? Does the statute not apply to materials in the library media center collections, including classroom libraries?
I'm going to object because she's now arguing with the witness. She asked the question, the witness answered. If she doesn't like the answer, that doesn't mean she can argue with her.
I'm just trying to understand.
Did we not agree to no objections except lack of
Excuse me,
civility?
sir.
That was it. Did
Sir,
we not agree to that?
are you witnessing, are you
Sorry.
presenting the
I
document?
thought we agreed to no objections.
I know you exchanged no objections.
I can object. Thank you. Please, let's move with your question and ask directly for her, please.
Ms. Wall, I'm so sorry that I'm having a hard time understanding. I read the statute and it says provide for library media center collections. So the collection of the library media center. It doesn't make any distinction saying this is different than this. And it says including classroom libraries, which is obviously, a different subset of the library. And it says it needs to be selected based on reader interest, support of state academic standards, and align curriculum, the academic needs of student and faculty. This was also reflected in the training. You rejected the training. You said that it was inappropriate or didn't apply to all library materials. So I'm asking you, does the statute apply to the library materials? And do you take that into consideration when you select your texts?
It's all considered, but also the ability for students to choose freely, that don't apply to standards or curriculum.
Can you point to the statute where you're pulling that wording from?
Dr. Marie, ask her for her professional opinion as a professional media specialist for her collection.
That's great, but she pointed to wording that I can't find in the statute, so I
Well,
want
she
to know where
doesn't
it's
have
at.
a statute in front of her. It would take time for her to research it.
Well, then I guess I would like to request that you submit to me that statute, because I'm not familiar with that. It's gonna add it to my understanding. Okay. Question, do you accept and follow our legislature's guidelines as put forth in the Florida statutes for the selection and retention of your school library material?
The statute that I follow, and I've been guided, my guidance and my professional judgment to follow, is that from 1006.40, purchase of instructional materials, 3D, 1, free of pornography, suited to students' needs and their ability to comprehend the material presented, appropriate for grade level and age group for which the materials are used or made available.
Okay, yes, that is in the statute, but then there's further statutes that govern selection criteria. Are you not aware of the other statutes until now?
Dr. Marie Rose. Objection. She has answered how she selects and the criteria she uses.
Can I reword the question? So I'm really looking for a simple answer. Do you apply the criteria as dictated in the statutes, all of them, which I've read to you, in your selection of library materials?
The witness has given you the criteria for her selection. You can't find the word you're looking for, Dr. Moore.
I'm looking for a yes or no to that question.
What was the question? Restate it, please.
My question is, do you make your selection choices guided by the statutes, guiding media selection criteria as dictated in these statutes that I presented here today?
I follow the statute that I've been guided to use, making my decisions.
And who provided that guidance to you?
That is just from my professional judgment and research and yes, district.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
From my own, professional research, judgment, and what is provided from the district.
From the district, from whom provided it to you?
By DeVault.
I would like to ask that her notes be copied and put in the records. Would that be allowed?
Sure.
So would you agree to that?
Not necessarily, no, this is not a civil proceeding, as we have been told.
We're just asking.
I'm just asking if I can have a copy of her notes. I'm sorry? Could I have a copy of her notes to put in the record?
I don't think they're personal notes, no.
Dr. Rose, this hearing is recorded. You can request, you can review it once it's available.
Her notes, ma'am, I don't know how to see her notes.
But it's in the hearing.
Her physical notes.
Oh, her notes, her personal notes?
Yes, ma'am.
No, those are her personal.
Okay. Now you mentioned that you received guidance and training from Ms. Duval. To the best of your understanding, does Ms. Duval find things objectionable or upsetting in the DOE mandatory training for media specialists? And if so, could you please describe?
I can't make a comment on what she thinks, her opinions on that.
Well, you did say that she's offered guidance on interpreting the training, correct?
It's relating the training and comparing to the statute.
And what kind of guidance has she provided?
Well, the first training was facilitated by her to all media specialists.
Question for you. Do you know the circulation history of this text and how many times it's been checked out since its acquisition?
I don't, and I can't recall that it has been checked out. We have a brand new library, so outside of popular characters, we have very many books that don't get circulated often.
When was this book acquired?
That would have been with the new new library purchase in 2021.
Can you explain that acquisition process?
The district works with a vendor and they curate the collection to purchase. I did not select this text.
Was there stakeholders input in that process?
No, I believe that was before that was a legal requirement.
Do you know, and under the current policy, if the SAC, the School Advisory Council, has to approve the acquisition list?
I'm not aware of that.
You're not aware of it. Question. I believe my son has media special or library, I'm not sure what you call it, at least once a week, if not twice a week. Oftentimes it's cited that I could limit my child's access to this book if I don't like the book. However, that should not be for books that shouldn't be in the library in the first place. It should be for those that meet criteria. But my question for you is, if I were to opt out of this book or flag it for my son, what would stop you during your media special class from picking it up off the shelf and reading it to the group?
That's not a text I would choose because that would open up conversations that I would not have with children.
So are you saying that the book's not appropriate for the K-5 environment?
It cannot be instructional.
But I don't know, is library instructional? When it's a special, I don't know, is it?
We read stories and we talk about themes and character development.
So you recognize that this book would not be appropriate for you to pick it up and read it to the students? Because it would require discussion that you can't engage in. Is that correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't choose a book like that, but a student may want to choose a book that represents them or something that they are curious about.
So a book that you think requires adult discussion, when no adult can have a discussion with them, you do think it's appropriate for it to be in the library?
For their choice, and unless every parent can restrict any book in our library, and I respect that.
But how would a parent know if their child picked up that book before they checked it out and was reading it?
If they're that concerned, they would look at the catalog and search for these titles that they find questionable, and they could make a list of what is restricted.
But that doesn't answer my question. Let me restate it. There's a certain amount of browsing time for students in the library looking at the shelves and pick up a book and decide if they're going to check it out. If that book has been flagged for them, what prevents them from picking it up and browsing it during that time and reading it during that selection process?
But, well, there's usually adult guidance, there's myself and there's my assistant. and we're watching and monitoring what they're choosing, what they're looking at. They don't have a lot of time to sit and read an entire text.
So nothing would stop them from picking that up and reading it. I mean, you're not walking around with a printout with every student's child's restrictions, are you?
Dr. Murray, she's answered your question. You have 41 seconds.
Well, I just want to say, I've stated before, I have not agreed to a policy change that limits my time. I have to 1 hour. I wish to complete my proffering of evidence to the school board in what I consider fair and adequate, so that they can review it, and then ultimately so it can be reviewed by the DOE magistrate.
You will have that right with you, a petition to the school board once the recommended order has been placed on the agenda. At this time, your time now is 10 seconds.
So do you think this book meets the selection criteria as dictated in the statutes for selection?
It's free of pornography, peer reviews that rate it for elementary age students. It's not my position to judge what is appropriate or not appropriate for someone else's child.
Actually, that's your professional position, I believe.
Thank you, Dr.
Each
Murray.
parent has different.
You are excused. Thank you. Ms. Siegel?
Dr. Rule, is this your laptop?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I just close it? I don't want to look at anything that's on your screen because that might be just yours.
And Ms. Green, this is on my time now. Ms. Wall, where'd you go?
Oh,
I get to ask a couple questions. Okay, you told us that you have a master's degree from the University of South Florida. When did you receive that degree?
2018.
And how long have you been working for the Alachua County School Board?
This is my 13th year.
Has it all been as a media specialist?
Yes.
In which schools?
The first 2 years I was at Rollins Elementary and then Terwilliger Elementary.
Would you tell us what let me make sure I get the word correct. Do children from grades K through 2 have free range of the library to pick up whatever book they want?
Yeah, we limit their access to the feature book easy section, and we select some nonfiction materials for them based on their interests.
Would a child in grade K through 2 be able to access this particular book without adult supervision?
No.
Okay. You were involved in the meeting at Terwilliger to evaluate this text once the parents' objection came in, correct?
Yes.
And what was your involvement?
It's the school media specialist.
And who else was involved?
I believe Ms. Harbor, parent, Ms. Rayner.
And there was a parent rep there?
Yes.
And Ms. Harbor is the principal, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this book was part of the purchase that was made when Terwilliger was moved from the old site near the mall out to Parker Road, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Were you responsible for the selection of any of the texts in that?
No.
I may have very little. When Dr. Marule submitted her objection to this book, and it was evaluated by your committee, she didn't check that it was pornographic, because it is not, correct?
Correct.
And she didn't check that the book was prohibited under the statute that describes sexual acts that are prohibited, correct?
Yes.
And she checked the book that the material was not suited to student needs and abilities to comprehend the material. Do you have an opinion as to whether that book is suited suited to student needs and ability to comprehend the material in the book?
I know that it's rated a reading level for students that are at my school.
Okay. I have nothing else, thank you.
Maybe. Do you have any questions? She's excused out.
I'm sorry, I'm just still so confused about the process because the rules seem to keep changing. I thought we weren't doing cross-examination, which would mean I don't get to ask her questions, but I don't know.
When you came in today and handed me this, and it says that we agreed to a simplified procedure, and you say we're not in agreement, then we're just back to where we were before, number one. Number two, with respect to timing, this provision was put in January for the January hearing. We all were aware of it. Notwithstanding the fact that there was 1 hour, when we had the hearing transcribed, you had almost an hour and a half. I had offered to give you extra time, but you refused my offer. I do not have a problem at this point giving her extra time, but only about 15 more minutes because I want to finish what I have to say also. So I will agree that she can have 15 more minutes. I would suggest maybe it be used expeditiously. And then we can, that should give us up to about 2 hours. But these were the rules, and we don't have to, when we create a procedure, we don't have to get the permission of everybody in the public to whether that procedure is appropriate. We create a procedure, we clear it with the superintendent and the deputy superintendent, and we cleared it with the hearing officer because she's the one that has to make the decisions. So, if you want to go ahead and she can call another witness.
Can
Let me explain that.
I just respond to that for a moment? I'm sorry. When you play a game, whatever game, there's rules. There's house rules or there's
That's
official
the
rules.
rule, please.
But the rules keep shifting.
They're not shifting. I explained at the beginning, so you had 1 hour. You had 1 hour to present your case, including opening statements, presenting evidence, questioning witnesses, and making a closing. That was very specific up front. Your 1 hour.
I understand
And
that you
we
said
gave
that.
you your 1 hour. Now you're at another level. And we are following the process, but you cannot have as much time as
The process switched from December's hearing to January's
I've
hearing
been
to
sitting here
February's
from the
hearing.
beginning. I have not switched except the hour timing
Well, that's
because
a
the
switch.
first one went too long.
But that's a switch.
But
That's a
you
switch.
were aware. I'm not gonna have.
And
You
then-
may be excused. Attorney Seal, call
What,
the next
what
witness,
exactly
please.
is your authority to establish the time limits?
Attorney Seal, call your next witness, please.
Yes, ma'am, I will. I would call. Everybody's so neatly organized.
Ms. Harper.
Good afternoon, Ms. Harper. Will you tell the folks your name and what you do for a living?
My name is Heather Harper. I'm the principal at Terwilliger Elementary.
How long have you been principal at that school?
This is my second year at Terwilliger.
How long have you been with the district?
This is my 20th year.
And what did you do before you became principal?
Well, previously, I was principal at Alachua Elementary. Prior to that, I was an assistant principal. Prior to that, I was the supervisor of staff development for the district. Before that, a mentor coach for beginning teachers, and prior to that, I was a classroom teacher.
And what grades did you teach when you were a classroom teacher?
I taught first grade.
Okay, thank you. Were you involved, did you receive a request from Crystal Rule for objection to the book, It Feels Good to Be Yourself?
Yes, I did.
What did you do when you received that?
I notified Patty Duval and Ms. Swall so that we could form the committee committee and review the book based on the objection.
Okay, and did you do so?
Yes, we did.
And what did that meeting involve? Tell us how the meeting went and what the processes were.
Sure. Ms. Duval facilitated the meeting and provided us with statutory requirements around selection criteria. We were able to review the book together. We looked at peer-reviewed journals. We had a roundtable discussion so all committee members could provide input. And then we were all given a form to which we could document our input and vote.
I'm going to hand you a book of our exhibits.
I apologize, Ms. Harper, well, I'll tell you what, I will withdraw that question, and I think I can speak loud enough to be caught on all of this.
But if not, we'll do it this way. What was the result of your evaluation of the text?
My evaluation was that it met the statutory requirements for media selection, and I voted to keep the book in the media center.
And what about the committee? Was there a consensus or was there any differentiation?
There was a consensus, and I believe it was all in favor of keeping the book in the media center.
Okay. And did you relate that to Dr. Marul?
Yes, I did.
Okay, we have in the evidence we provided for Dr. Jackson, we have the pieces of paper the committee signed, but we also had, you wrote a letter to Dr. Marul and informed her of that decision. Did she ask you to go further with the evaluation?
She has, for several books, said she wanted it to go to the district level. I'm not sure if this particular book was one of them, but I know that she tends to submit another request for review of another material following me submitting a letter to her.
Okay, so that was your sole involvement with the evaluation of this particular book at your school?
Yes.
Okay, that's all the questions I have of you, ma'am.
Now I'm allowed to ask questions?
Yes, you may.
Ms. Harper, thank you for being here today. There's a broader question I just want to ask you. Ever since this has occurred, when I send emails for very, boring information, I don't get a response. Have you been instructed not to respond to emails when I ask for the SAT guidelines or
Dr. Monroe, that's not in line with the book. Next question. You need to speak with the principal personal on that issue. This is about.
She doesn't answer my emails.
I'm sorry, but this we have to continue with. Do you have a question on the book?
Yeah, I have another question. When I asked you for Daniel Norman's identity because the signature was illegible, did you forward that on to the public office, record of public offices?
Dr. Monroe, that's a personal issue.
No, it's about this book. Daniel Norman was at SAC member, but I wanted to call as a witness.
But you're asking her about the form.
No, I'm asking her, I wanted the identity of the person who signed the SAC form because I couldn't read the signature. So I'm asking if she took the proper protocol, which would be any public employee who receives a FOIA request needs it immediately forwarded on to
That
the...
still can be handled in a personal contact. We must continue with the hearing on the, do you have a question on the book?
Well, my question was the timeline because I wanted Ms. Norman to be a witness here today. And I told her
We're in the hearing for the book now, Dr. Monroe, please. But we can handle that in a personal situation. You have a question on the book content?
According to the district policy, the principal will review the objection and they meet with the teacher or parents, resident, or both in an attempt to resolve the objection. Did you offer to meet with me?
No, I did not.
Has that been true for all the challenges that have come through?
The first challenge you submitted, there was conversation and some attempts at phone calls between the two of us, and not since then.
Do you, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask this, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm gonna ask it if I get struck, it's struck. Do you find, do you find it appropriate that the parent representative was also an employee of the school? Do you see a conflict of interest for that?
Dr. Moreau, do you have a question on the book?
Ma'am,
You can make an appointment with the principal.
I'm sorry, Ms. Jackson, I don't understand your interruption when this is pertinent to the book and the process that she just outlined, asking her, she asked her, did the SAC meet, was there consensus?
It was on the book, from the form, from the letter she sent you, not about personal relationship. Please, Ms.
I'm not asking about a personal relationship. I don't know if you don't understand what I'm saying, or I'm just not understanding what you're saying. This has to do with the book. It has to do with the committee that reviewed the book.
You're asking about the structural makeup of the committee. That's what you're asking, is that correct? You said, why was the parent an employee? That has nothing to do with the review of the book.
I'm asking if there's a conflict of interest if the role of the parental representative is also an employee of the school.
Dr. Moreau, I'm going to object to the question. You have another one.
According to the policy by the district, there's no mention of a school library advisory council to review the book. So why was there a committee review of the book?
Isn't that in policy?
She's referring to the policy under which, or the procedure. Excuse me, ma'am. You don't like to be interrupted, and I'm answering her question, and you're interrupting me, please. I appreciate it, thank you. This is a procedure. There was a procedure in place when this book was initiated, and then we modified the procedure later, which we haven't had any come before you under the modified procedure, because we were having so much difficulty handling the number of things at the school level. So we changed the procedure to make the principal receives the objection and forwards it to the district committee. The district committee then meets and will take additional evidence if the objector wishes to give additional evidence, and then does not make a decision but makes a recommendation. And that recommendation can either be to agree with the objector and take the book off the shelf, or to disagree with the objector and keep the book on the shelf. If the district committee disagrees with the objector, and the objector wants to go further, it comes before you, before a hearing officer. You then make a recommendation to the board, and then the board, with public input, makes a decision. The reason that's important is the other meeting is a public meeting, but no public input is permitted. And we had a concern expressed by a board member whether that was appropriate to have a public meeting without input, even though that's what the state form said. But we, in discussing how to handle it, thought the board member had a better recommendation, had a better idea. And so we said, we're not going to make a decision, we'll make a recommendation. Then, if the district recommends the book be pulled off the shelf in agreement with the objector, that goes directly to the board because there'd be no reason for a hearing in front of you. And then the board would have public input, pro and con, its decision to agree. And that's what we're doing now. That's not what we did when this book came through. This book came through when there was still a school level committee going on.
If I may clarify, I'm referring to the current policy, not the procedure, and I'll read it to you. It says parents and residents of the county should make any such objection writing to the principal, identifying the specific instructional material, and stating the basis for the objection.
The principal will review the objection and may meet with the teacher, parent, resident, or both in an attempt to resolve the objection using an alternative instructional material. If the objection is not resolved to the objector's satisfaction, the principal shall refer the matter to the appropriate district level curriculum supervisor. The district level curriculum supervisor will meet with the objector and attempt to resolve the objection. Blah, blah, blah. The matter will be referred for a hearing. My question is, according to current policy, why did you hold a library advisory council meeting?
And that is not correct. She read instructional, not library materials only. That's the difference.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm not going to get into the review of procedure with the board. That's not why we're here. Is there any questions of Ms. Harper?
Yes, I have another question for you, Ms. Harper. Is it true that there's no student that's 13 or older at your Loger?
Yes.
Is it not a violation of state statutes or law to direct a student to therapy options under the age of 13 without parental consent?
Object. We're not talking about referral to any therapy. That was listed in the book, but we're here to see if we're going to retain this book.
The book provides contact information to therapists. So my question is that appropriate to disseminate to a child under the age of 13?
If you're referring to the Trevor Project, if you look at the Trevor Project, it is a nonprofit organization. It is a 501c3, and it is not subject in my research to the statutes you're referring to. In addition to that, we typically have nonfiction books that have resources in the back of the book. That's pretty common for nonfiction text.
I'm not sure of the organization of the Trevor Project, but they announce on their webpage or advertise that you'd be in contact with the therapist within minutes. Is that not true?
I can't speak to the organization and what they offer, but in my research, because you asked me this last time, they are not subject to those statutes because of their nonprofit delineation.
Did you get guidance from the DOE on that?
No, ma'am,
From
I
the
did
department?
Dr. Merle, any questions on the book?
That is in the
Any
book.
questions on the content of the book?
This is on the last page of the book.
I understand what's in the last page, but we want to say, but based on the criteria for a book being in the library, there are 3. Okay, any questions?
Ms. Harper, would you direct a student to therapy without parental consent if they're under the age of 13? And would you allow that to happen in your school?
The therapy, no, I would not.
Thank
And give you dismissed. Next witness, Ms.
Yes. Ask John Ray to the stand, please. Dr. Ray, would you please give us your name and what you do for a living?
Dr. John Rain, I'm the curriculum specialist for social studies.
Slow down.
Dr. John Rain, curriculum specialist for social studies for Alachua County Public Schools. That's K through 12.
And how long have you been with the Alachua County Public Schools?
Been with Alachua County Public Schools for 8 years, and in this position, this is my 6th year.
What did you do prior to the time you came to the district level?
Before being on district level, I was a classroom teacher. I taught high school psychology at a variety of levels, including AP, IB. I also taught history at a variety of levels, including AP and IB, as well as language arts courses.
Okay. And when did you get your PhD?
2013.
And what is the subject matter of the PhD?
I have an educational doctoral degree in curriculum instruction with an emphasis on social studies education and the history of education.
Okay. You are familiar with the book, It Feels Good to Be Yourself, correct?
Yes.
How are you familiar with that book?
I've read the book multiple times in relation to the filing of the motion category.
Were you?
I'm sorry, that's the filing of the motion. I don't know if that's the correct wording, but the paperwork.
It's necessary to talk a little slowly because the court reporter is taking everything down. So do the best you can.
Sorry,
That's all
I'm a
right.
little nervous.
Were you on the district committee that evaluated this book after the objection by Crystal Marule?
Yes.
Okay. What occurred during that meeting with the district on this book?
Before the meeting, we received a copy of, actually, I believe we received a video link to the YouTube read aloud of the book, so I can see the book. We had an opportunity to read the book at the meeting. We were presented with the documentation of the peer-reviewed journals that were used, as well as the objections, so that we could make our determinations. We then discussed the book, made our determination, and voted on it.
What was your opinion about the appropriateness of the book in an elementary library?
I felt that there were one or two words in the book that were above the reading level of elementary, but I did not feel that that was enough to make the book so that it would not be accessible to an elementary school student. I believe Dr. Merle, sorry, she posted my comments up there where I said that while it is comprehensible to students at that age, meaning a student I believe in elementary school could understand the material based on the way it was presented, that it does beg adult interaction.
One of the objections, or one of the statements made on the objection form that Crystal Marule served in this case was that the book was based on a theory of gender identity that is not widely accepted in the general community, nor is it scientifically based. Do you agree with that statement?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Why not?
Transsexualism has been part of the psychology community and its scientific basis since the 1940s. It was first defined by Magnus Hirschfeld in the 1940s. Later on, a book on transsexualism was written by David Caldwell in 1949. 1966, Henry Benjamin published his foundational text, Transsexual Phenomenon. Transsexualism has been in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual since its third edition, published in 1980, where it was listed as transsexualism. In the fourth edition of the DSM, which was published in 1994, it was referred to as gender identity disorder for adults and adolescents, meaning it did have child diagnoses in there. And then with the publication of the fifth edition in 2013, it was changed to gender identity, from gender identity disorder, I apologize, to gender dysphoria, where gender dysphoria is not as if someone who is transsexual has something wrong with them for being transsexual. It is the associated other issues that come along with it, such as anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, etc.
So it is not in and of itself a medical diagnosis.
That's correct. And the international version of it, the ICD, in the ICD-10, it was still considered a medical diagnosis, as of the ICD-11, which I believe was published in 2021. And the ICD is published by the World Health Organization. Moved gender identity disorder from that iteration to gender incongruence, and has been put in a sexual health chapter, not a mental disorder chapter.
Is gender dysphoria a controversial theory?
Not within the psychological community, no.
Do you have an opinion as to whether the theories in this book, the statements in this book, are controversial within the scientific community?
Within what is taught at my level, at least, which would be an introduction to psychology, of course, no.
Got me a little bit aware. Are you aware of any evidence that there is a rise in the incidence of gender dysphoria in children because of reading texts like this book, It Feels Good to Be Yourself?
So if we talk about evidence of gender dysphoria on the rise, we can really break that into two parts. One is there a general rise in gender dysphoria? And the second part would be related to reading books. Yes, there is a rise in general gender dysphoria, but we can think of that in terms of, say, autism, right? Autism in the 1920s was referred to as the Jewish disease or the Jewish disorder, because they were the ones that would take their kids to see it. Since there has been more medical literature in recent times on gender dysphoria, there has been a rise in diagnoses of gender dysphoria. Now, referring to the second part, has there been a rise because people are reading books about it? There is no consistent research that points to that I've seen. I've done multiple searches through scholarly databases.
Thank you very much, sir.
Dr. Miller?
Do you agree that there was no medical evidence of young girl gender dysphoria prior to 2005?
I do not agree with that.
Do you agree that gender dysphoria was almost exclusively limited to boys before 2005?
I do not know anything of that. I have read research articles though that have talked about gender dysphoria in males much earlier, that were published much earlier than 2005.
Is gender dysphoria in girls now more common than in boys in 2020?
I apologize, I do not know that.
I have a question. Were you aware of the state statute for library selection that says each district school board shall adopt procedures for developing library media center collections, which must A, require that the book selections meet the criteria in statute 1006.40, B, require consultation of reputable, professionally recognized reviewing periodicals and school community stakeholders, C, provide for library media center collections, including classroom libraries, based on reader interest, support of state academic standards, and align curriculum in the academic needs of students and faculty, as well as D, provide for regular removal or discontinuance of books based on, at minimum, physical condition, rate of recent circulation, alignment to state academic standards, and relevancy to curriculum, out-of-date content, and required removal pursuant to subparagraph A2.
Yes, that was read to me when I joined the committee and at each of the committee meetings.
So you understand that according to the state statute, that the library media center collections need to be selected based on reader interest and support of state academic standards and aligned curriculum?
Oftentimes in legalese, when and is put in there, it's also referred to as and or, and as such, you don't necessarily need all of these. Now again, I am not a lawyer, so I'm not going to say that is 100% the case, but from my interaction with individuals that are lawyers, I've been told that that is the case.
Which and are you referring to?
Well, you said you have different criteria, and
I'll read it for you again,
The
so tell me which
criteria
and
Okay.
you mean, please.
You need to only talk one at a time.
my apologies, I did not mean to.
My apologies, too. So, provide for library and media center collections, including classroom libraries, based on reader interest, support of state academic standards, and aligned curriculum. Is that the and you're talking about? Okay, so,
So any one of those three on that line could be used, not necessarily meeting all of them.
What's an and?
but it says and the academic need of students and faculty. So you take into consideration, I just want to understand how you're mentally organizing this and how I mentally organize it. Basically, I can break that down into bullet points of considerations. You're going to consider reader interest. You're going to consider support state academic standards. You're going to evaluate the alignment with curriculum. And you're going to evaluate the academic needs of student and faculty, correct? And we're going to apply that criteria to look at the text and see how it plays out for each one of those sub-bullet points. Would that make sense?
Dr. Jackson, he's not offered as a media specialist. He's a specialist in social studies and psychology, and so that kind of curriculum. So I think if I were in a courtroom, I would say there's a lack of predicate, but I don't think he has not testified to anything that has to do with the selection criteria. That's not what he was offered for.
My question, if I misunderstood your title, you had something to do with curriculum, correct?
Yes, ma'am, I'm in charge of the social studies curriculum for the district.
Okay, so this has an alignment with curriculum, so I'm building my question about the alignment to curriculum. May I proceed?
Yes, let me ask one thing. Mr. Dr. Bunch, you're here as a specialist on curriculum. Is that right? Okay. And you're talking if this book were placed on the shelves in a curriculum.
That's not my question.
That's, okay, restate your question, please.
My question is, per the statute, the procedures must take into consideration, and then we bullet pointed them out, right? Reader interest, support of state academic standards, alignment with curriculum, and the academic needs of students and faculty, right? So those are the bullet points.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question is, when you're evaluating this text to see if it supports state academic standards or if it's aligned with curriculum, what say ye?
This book in particular?
Yeah, this book in particular,
It's
does it?
not aligned specifically with social studies standards,
It does not.
with social studies standards, no, ma'am.
Do you know of what standards it does align with?
would say it has the possibility to align with English language arts standards, but I do not have a thorough enough knowledge of those standards to say 100%.
Well, that's Mr. Berry, I'm sure he
All
does.
right, thank you, Dr. Benz. In lieu of time,
So, well, can I finish the other bullet point? Would you say that this text in evaluation to that criteria supports state academic standards?
It has the ability to support state academic standards for reading, yes.
And a curriculum on gender identity, would it support or would it be against that? Or would
So
it
those are two
violate it?
different things you're asking though, because one is, would it be able to be supported? Yes, it would be able to be supported, but legally it cannot be used in support. Because
Okay.
of,
Dr. Moreau,
Well, I
we're getting
think
into
this is relevant.
we're getting into the instructional curriculum.
No, I am not. I'm getting into the alignment of library material selection when compared, if it's in support of state academic standards and aligned curriculum. He said that it does not align with the social studies curriculum. So now I'm moving and asking that it doesn't align with state standards, and he's making a very eloquent argument that perhaps that there's some standards it would support, maybe literacy, perhaps other standards it would not, as the standards are currently written. And I just want to make sure that I understand that that's what you're saying.
It is absolutely, it is absolutely, first of all, is she beyond her 15 minutes? Number one. Number two, it's absolutely inappropriate for someone that's appearing before a hearing officer to argue incessantly with the hearing officer. That's the decision of the hearing officer and not her to make those kind of arguments. That's just for the record, but I agree to 15 minutes, but if we're gonna waste it with pontificating, then I think it's inappropriate.
Thank you, sir. You were dismissed.
thank you.
Your next witness, Attorney Seaver.
Kevin Berry, please.
I'm sorry, before you go on, may I leave? I
Oh.
pick up my daughter from school.
Yeah, he's got child care responsibilities, so please, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Berry, would you tell everyone here your name and what you do for a living?
Sure, good afternoon. My name is Kevin Berry. I'm the curriculum director for Alachua County Public Schools.
And are you a K-12 curriculum director?
Yes, ma'am.
And before you became the curriculum director, well, let me ask you this, how long have you been with the Alachua County Public Schools?
This is my 27th year.
Goodness gracious. What did you do before you became the district curriculum specialist?
So we also had a position prior. I was an elementary curriculum supervisor. Prior to that, I was assistant principal curriculum resource teacher. I also taught 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
When did you move from teaching to the district office?
8 years ago.
And what is your functions at the district office currently?
So I coordinate and support the implementation of curriculum materials for all content areas with amazing team members like Dr. Rain.
You're familiar with children's literature, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with the process of selecting children's literature for inclusion in a classroom?
Yes, ma'am.
Was this book selected for any instructional use?
No, ma'am.
Then that means the book, it feels good to be yourself.
Yes, ma'am. My understanding was this book was selected for inclusion in a classroom, in the school library.
Okay. To your knowledge, was the book ever on a recommended reading list?
No.
Do you agree with the following statement that I talked about in my opening remarks? That any library book that encourages kids to read voluntarily is supplemental to their education?
Yes.
Would you agree with, because it's supplemental to their education because reading is required in all subject areas?
Yes.
And would you finally agree with the statement that reading is not confined to the curricular material of any given classroom course?
Yes.
You were part of the district committee that reviewed this book?
I was.
How did you learn there was going to be a challenge to the book, It Feels Good to Be Yourself?
So there was a lot of email communication from Mrs. Harper, Patty Duval, and Dr. Merle, Dr. Merle herself, indicating that they needed to move that to the next level of the process.
Who are the members of the committee at the district level?
So there's myself, there's the district media specialist who's present in the room today. There's the district's supervisor of school counseling, a curriculum specialist depending on the content area, and a parent representative.
Was the meeting publicly noticed?
Yes.
And where did you meet?
We met in the district office in conference room B upstairs.
Did Crystal Rule attend that meeting?
She did not.
Did she provide any additional information for you to consider at the meeting?
No, although we were able to review her challenge.
Did any members of the public attend?
I really can't remember. I do believe there were a few members that attended this meeting.
The committee made a decision about what to do with the book. What was the decision made by the committee?
The committee decided that we wanted to leave the book in circulation at its current level.
Okay. And you filled out a form? Okay. Did you inform Crystal Marule of the decision of the committee?
I did.
And you wrote a letter to her?
I did. I wrote a letter, and I believe it went to her the following morning or following day.
Okay, and Dr. Jackson, for your purposes, it's Exhibit 7 on page 58 of our materials. I have no further questions, Mr. Berry. Thank you.
Dr. Merle, you have 5 minutes from the 15 minutes that Attorney Sealy is giving you, and those 5 minutes are also including your closing statement, as well as your rebuttal for this witness. If you'd like to continue.
Okay, just one quick question, and I'll save it for my closing statement. I have other ones. Was I advised I could present additional evidence at the district level?
I did not advise you. I couldn't say if anyone else advised you of that.
And just one other quick, since you're the curriculum director, at what grade, I honestly don't know the answer, at what grade are sex roles or sex differences instructed to students?
So that, I am not aware of that grade level either. That is not part of something that I'm aware of. I will say that there's been discussion around the connection to curriculum standards, and I know that we looked at selection criteria, but one of the curriculum standards is understanding stories, character settings, events, and so I could see a connection with that. That's a kindergarten and first grade standard. We also are implementing resiliency standards beginning next year, which involves showing respect to others, and that's a primary standard that I think is like a consideration. I also am noting like the differences between a requirement and selection criteria and a consideration when it comes to reviewing materials, and I think that those are different standards.
Mr. Berry, you have to follow. This is not a curriculum topic.
Sorry.
Thanks, ma'am. You are dismissed. Thank you.
I do have a follow-up.
Yes.
Mr. Berry, I'm going to hand you what is our Exhibit 1, and I'll have you take a look at it and see if you recognize it.
Yes.
What is it?
This is the citizen's request for reconsideration of library materials procedure. It lists the procedure on one place, and attached to it is the request from Dr. Merle.
Okay. Would you look at the paragraph on the front that says district review?
Yes.
And there are 5 bullet points under that title, correct?
Yes.
Would you read the sentence after the 5th bullet point?
The objector is further permitted to provide any evidence they desire to the committee to consider. This meeting will also be publicly noticed without public comment.
And is that is under district level review?
Yes.
But no additional information was provided by Dr. Marule?
Not to me.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Attorney Sealy, you have another witness.
Yes. Patty Duvall, please.
Can we take a 2-minute recess? I can use the restroom.
Yes, we'll take a 5 minute.
Ms. Duvall, I will make this short and sweet, hopefully. Would you tell us your name and what you do for a living?
Yes, my name is Patty Duvall, and I'm a district media specialist for Alachua.
And how long have you been with the Alachua Public Schools?
Since 2007.
What is your educational background that brought you to this practice?
So I was a classroom teacher. I got a degree in elementary education in 1990 and taught elementary school for many years. And in the 1999-2000 school year, I had the opportunity to become a school library media specialist and open a brand new 6 through 12 library. But at that time, in order to get your media certification, you had to have 30 hours of coursework. So I took a class classes at the University of Florida where I got a master's degree in educational media and instructional design.
Okay, very good. And you're familiar with the procedures for book challenges?
Yes, ma'am.
What was your responsibility for the book challenges at the time this challenge came through?
So when this challenge came through, we were still doing a school level review first, at which I would facilitate the meeting, but I was not a voting member. And as a facilitator, I made sure that the committee was aware of what the complaint was and what the statutory requirements are for selection of library materials.
What are your responsibilities at the district level?
So at the district level, I still facilitate, but I am also a voting member.
Did you facilitate the meeting at the district level for this particular book?
Yes, ma'am.
Who all was on that committee?
So there was still, there was a representation of myself as district media specialist, Kevin Berry represented the director of curriculum, Dr. Griffin represented student services, Dr. Rammer represented curriculum, and there was a parent also on that committee, whose name I can't pronounce.
And it was a parent whose child would be in a school where that text is available?
Their child has access to the material, yes.
Okay. And you were a voting member of that
Yes,
also?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the result of the evaluation of that text?
So everyone agreed that it did not violate statutory requirements and there was no reason to remove it from the library shelves.
In the years you've been a media specialist here, are you familiar with the criteria for selecting books for library materials, not instructional, but library? What are the criteria?
So as of 7/1/2022, after HB 1467 was passed, the selection criteria for library materials was much better defined, I guess is a good way to put it. It's that selection criteria must meet the same standards that are in 1006.40, which we have talked about a couple times today. It can't be pornographic. It has to, the student must be able to have the ability to comprehend the material, and it must be age appropriate and grade level appropriate for the student to have access to the material.
Is it necessary when you select a particular book for the library that the book be supplemental to a specific area of the curriculum?
No, it is not.
Why not?
That's not part of the criteria that's defined in 1006.403D.
Okay. Would you agree with the statement made by the Florida Department of Education defendants in the Parnell case we've discussed, that, let me make sure I have the language correct, that it's just important to get a child to read, and that's supplemental to all areas of instruction?
Yes, ma'am. Our mission as school library media specialists is to put books in kids' hands.
Okay. And what were the opinions of the committee?
The committee voted that it did not violate statute and should not be removed based on that consideration.
And to your knowledge, has Crystal Marule ever told you or instructed Terwilliger Elementary School to forbid her child from reading this book?
No, ma'am.
Has she ever told you or Terwilliger Elementary, to your knowledge, that her child was not permitted to read the book Melissa?
To my knowledge, there has not been a submission of library limitation for those books from Dr. Moore.
And how about the first book that was objected to, A is for Activists? To your knowledge, has Dr. Rule ever said, don't let my child read that book?
Correct.
Thank you, ma'am.
I just find it very problematic that I did submit a form requesting that my son not be provided with any library material that does not meet the statutory requirements for selection.
Correct. But every book in our library meets the statutory requirement for library selection.
Except for the 6 withdrawn from GHS. My
Yes.
question, are you willing, Ms. Duval, to submit to the authority of the DOE as expressed in the statutes and require training to guide your selection of library materials?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Are you willing to submit to the authority of the Department of Education, Florida Department of Education, as expressed in the statutes and require training to guide your selection of library materials?
Yes.
Do you submit to the authority of Florida Statute 1006.28 parentheses 2 parentheses D 2C that states providing for library and media center collections, including classroom libraries, based on reader interest, support of state academic standards, and aligned curriculum and the academic needs of students and faculty?
So my interpretation of that statement is that the statute says that school boards must provide for, in establishing the library media center, that the book must meet the selection criteria established in 1006.403D, which is the selection criteria for a library book. The overall library collection should support standards, which they do. It doesn't mean that every single book in the library must apply a state standard to that book. Or else, what would the kids read? Because we want to make sure that we provide books that are reader interest, and reader interest and curriculum don't always go hand in hand. So that being said, we wouldn't have Dogman, we wouldn't have Diary of a Wimpy Kid, we wouldn't have Ginny B. Jones, or all of the other popular series that students read.
Why does the training then stipulate that the selection of library materials, you need to be selecting books that support the standards and the curriculum and be aligned with them, and to err on the side of caution when there's any red flags about that?
So, first of all, the training for the library media specialist, it does tell us to err on the side of caution. This book was purchased 2 years before that training even happened. So, and 1006.283D looked totally different at the time that this book was selected. So the standards and the library selection and the clarification all happened with the passage of HB 1467, which took place on 7/1/2022.
So what I understand is under current statutes, you would need to take that into consideration, and thus, when brought to your attention, you should reevaluate or audit the book's appropriateness according to current statute. Is that correct?
No.
So they're godfathered in?
If the book is formally challenged, we review it against the standard. This book meets the selection criteria based in 1006.403D.
But it violates the support of state academic standards and aligned curriculum. If
That's
you want to
not the
argue,
selection criteria.
it is part that says the procedures must provide school library media services, establishment and maintenance. The procedures must provide for library media center collections, including classroom libraries based on reader interest, support state academic standards, and align curriculum and the academic needs of student and faculty.
Every book in the school library is not required to stand up to a standard. Our overall collection does support our library, our curriculum. So there are books in the library that students can go to the library, and if they need to do a report on government or if they're researching a particular topic, all of those books are available to students that are within the selection criteria, but every book in the library does not align to curriculum.
So your interpretation
Thank you,
is,
Dr. Maroon.
but
We have utilized your 5 minutes all. You had 15 total minutes that was given to you by Attorney Siegel.
I just want to ask where she's getting that guidance from,
That
because
time-
according to the training,
That time
it
has
says differently.
expired. Thank you. All right. Any other questions?
Further, Ms. Duval.
Thank
Can I
you.
borrow your time?
No, ma'am.
Can I just add one thing? Okay. So I should be done.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, we are now at the closing statements. Attorney Steele,
If she wishes to make a closing statement, that's fine.
you will give way to.
I will give her 10 minutes if she wants to take 10. I will not take the rest of the 25 minutes.
Thank you for that graciousness, I appreciate it. All right. So we started this presentation by looking at the statute that prohibits instruction on gender identity to students under the 9th grade that have gender or sexual implications. This is the ground upon which all criteria for the selection or retention of library books must rest. This is a standard of instruction for all public elementary and middle school teachers. Therefore, it prohibits teaching about gender identity or promoting certain ideology grounded in gender identity. The statutory criteria for handling parent challenges of library books are clear, and I'm relying on the 3rd and 4th standard in sections 1006, parentheses 2, parentheses A, 2B. More specifically, library books must be age appropriate and complementary to the instructional curriculum of the children who have access to the book. Further, in looking at the criteria for book selection and or retention in the library collection, we see these concepts fleshed out. They clearly show the content of It Feels Good to Be Yourself is not appropriate for elementary age children, especially kindergarten or first grade, to look at or read. Even with adult guidance, which would have to be parents, it is highly questionable if the content is appropriate for young developing children who have no experiential base to understand the content. And certainly, teachers are not in a position to explore such a book with a child under the 9th grade. The interesting wrinkle here is that the district level media specialists and her staff at Wilbur Elementary School believe that they have an inside understanding of these criteria, not by the Department of Education who promulgated the mandatory instruction for school media specialists. Whether they're willing to say directly or indirectly, they believe that the Florida Department of Education, staff and legal counsel got it wrong. Essentially, they're saying we are not going to operate under the law we have been given. We are going to operate under what we think the law is. This conduct is deserving of discipline and possibly even greater punitive action. So while my primary motivation is that of a concerned parent about library books that don't comply with state prescribed standards, I have a secondary motivation as a mother and a parent. I am concerned that no one is speaking up for the vulnerable group that has been victimized by the social contagion of sudden onset of gender dysphoria, namely our young daughters. Not only do they now have smartphones for the past 12 years, and the internet has produced an epidemic of bullying and a 400% increase in suicides by girls under the age of 13, it has produced much more depression and the phenomenon of sudden onset of gender dysphoria. The materials in our school libraries must be neutral in the face of this social epidemic. This reality has been documented by the book Irreversible Damage by Abigail Shrier, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. May I quote her briefly from her work? Quote, by October 2019, I had completed most of the interviews for this book, and while the stories of torment and loss never ceased to affect me, I adjusted. The distraught testimonies I had gathered of those who had submitted to this medievalism only to decide that they'd made a mistake. But at some point, I had more or less managed to live with the facts of the bewildering craze in which I had no personal stake. Like any topic one reports on, at some point you get used to it. I was concerned about another population too, one I consider more vulnerable. A population we seem to have abandoned in pursuit of identity politics and progressive bonafide. A group that should, by right, be making us awfully proud, but instead seems to be teetering on the edge of disaster, the brink of despair. Teenage girls. They hold the very possibility for our future, if only they weren't tearing themselves apart. Expressing concern about teens suddenly identifying as trans has become politically unwise and socially verbatim, hateful by definition, an alleged assault on all transgender people, genuine and ersatz. But of course, the social contagion captivating teens has nothing to do with those who have suffered gender dysphoria since childhood and in adulthood fashioned for themselves a transgender life. Many trans adults I talk to apologize for the trans activists that claim to speak in their name. It's important to remember that activists are the most extreme members of any group. All the institutions we've built to keep young people from making irreparable mistakes have failed them.
The university, the schools, the doctors, the therapists, and even the churches have been won over by a dogged ideology, end quote. Therefore, in conclusion, my motivation is twofold. On one hand, I am here as a parent to hold the public servants of this school district accountable to the rule of law. On the other, I am here to be the voice of the voiceless, the voice of the defenseless children who are being used as pawns in this ideological struggle, specifically children in a Title I school that have a disproportionate underrepresentation of parental involvement, but a disproportionate overrepresentation of books promoting gender ideology. You intentionally added a magnet program at this school to bolster all positive metrics, including parent involvement, and thank God you did. It is no coincidence that my child ended up at this school at this critical moment of this cultural war. Rather, it is divine providence. You may continue your ad hominem attacks against me, weaponize the media and lobbyist groups to disparage me publicly, constantly change the rules and the procedures to your benefit, but I will continue to, quote, speak truth to power, to borrow one of your favorite expressions. I will not be discouraged from doing that which is right. For I am not afraid of those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, I am afraid of the one who destroyed both soul and body. Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven. I will not be the only parent who stands up against this cabal. I may be the first, but I will not be the last. Courage is contagious.
Yes, ma'am. This is now the third hearing we've had on books that Crystal Marule has objected to. And she's been critical of the process that we've used regarding book challenges. She has described our process in public as corrupt, and she has described it as the most parent-unfriendly process she's ever seen. I'm going to give you some statistics about this corrupt, parent-unfriendly process. Crystal Marule has made 15 challenges to books in the libraries of Alachua County. Of the 15, the corrupt, parent-unfriendly process resulted in 40% of her challenges being agreed to. We have removed 6 books that she challenged. 6 out of 15 is 40%. 2 other books she challenged were not removed, but she did not go on to ask for a hearing on those 2 books. So there was, the majority of the challenges she's made, apparently the corrupt, unfriendly to parent process was successful. The only time the process was unsuccessful is when we disagreed with her position, with her opinion. What about this book? It's the same topic as the book that was presented at the Parnell case. It's gender identity. It's the book that in pleadings in open court, the State Board of Education said that it had been incorrectly removed from another school board shelf and it should be put back. And the district in Lake County did put it back. She's now asking you to remove the same type of book from all the libraries in Alachua County. She's asking you to do the same thing that the state of Florida, in pleadings before the court, a federal court, said was incorrect. We recommend that you follow the arguments made by the state in that pleading, because any library book that encourages children to read voluntarily is supplemental to their education. Reading is required in all subject areas, and as the state of Florida defendant said, it is not confined to a particular curricular interest material in a course. So any argument about what curriculum does this support doesn't make any difference. It is puzzling that if this book, if Melissa and if A's for Activists are so damaging to all the children of this county, that Crystal Marule has not told Terwilliger to make sure her child doesn't check it out. We would ask that you make a recommendation to the board that this book be retained. Thank you.
We have heard the testimony from the petitioner and the respondent,
And within 14 days of this hearing, I will render a recommended order, and it will be submitted to the school board. Each party will receive a copy of that order. The school board, at a regular business meeting, will make the final determination as to the disposition of this case. Dr. Murrow, you have an opportunity to attend that school board meeting and to speak on the item at that board meeting. You have the right to submit objections to the school board prior to that meeting, if you have any objections to my recommendation. Does either party have any questions for the hearing officer?
Okay, not from the district.
May we comment on your order before you submit it to the school board?
Okay. Are there any other questions? This hearing is